Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Yesterday was Zimbabwe's National Heroes Day, 12th of August. And the message from President Mnangagwa was let's not let us not take for granted the freedom we enjoy today. There is a sickening irony in all that. The first question one is going to ask is, what freedom are you talking about? Your freedom to do as you please, or the ordinary person's freedom? One of the things that I found really disturbing about Zimbabwe and this Heroes Day is that we have had so many heroes. I think since independence, at Heroes Acre alone, I think now they're looking at 44 heroes. And if you count provincial heroes, I think the number will probably be now getting on to thousands in the 44 years alone since the country's independence. And what is disappointing is during that period, the country has seen its worst economic decline. Millions of our people have been thrown into abject poverty. Over 40,000 Zimbabweans have been murdered in politically motivated violence at the hands of ZANU-PF. So one has got to ask is, where are the heroes in shining armor we should be riding to save the nation? Where are they? Why is the country in such a mess? And yet we continue to churn out all these heroes and heroines. The truth of the matter is, most of those so called heroes and heroines are themselves behind some of the looting and the tyranny that the nation has suffered this last 44 years. They are heroes because they are either part of the looters or the oppression, or they turned a blind eye to what was happening. To still consider them as national heroes then is to some extent laughable. How can we have so many heroes in the middle of so much human misery? And the heroes themselves have not lifted a finger to put an end to it. Doesn't make sense. Our criteria for who should be a hero is completely upside down. Those who are responsible for the looting and the heinous crimes and the tyrannical oppression are the ones who are deciding who is a hero and who is not. And that is why the country is in such a mess. Whether Mnangagwa likes it or not, Zimbabwe is a failed state. And to keep on pretending that somehow that is irrelevant is only helping to focus the light on how the whole thing is becoming a joke. Zimbabwe has never held free, fair, and credible elections. This was at the heart of one of the reasons why people went to war. One man, one vote. The whites denied the blacks the right to vote. They had no meaningful say in the governance of the country. And one way the whites ensured that was to keep the blacks poor deliberately. One of the things that would have made the greatest sense, forget the right to vote, the right to own property, is probably one that means a lot more to ordinary people than anything else. The right to own property. And in the case of the rural voters, the rural people, title deeds to the land, to the house on which their heart is built. That means everything to them. And yet, the white regime deliberately denied them that right. In a really annoying move, the whites would let in white foreigners, some of them immigrating from all over the world. As soon as they set foot in the country in Zimbabwe, they could get title deeds to a farm, hundreds of thousands of acres. And yet, Zimbabweans born in that country were denied the right to own even 1 hectare, 1 acre on which their heart was built. It made economic sense. There cannot be any denying. You don't have to be an economist to see that that made sense. If you give somebody the title deed to the 1 or 2 hectares on which their heart is built, they will be motivated to build a more even better housing structure there. They will be motivated to improve the grounds, plant more fruit trees, look after the indigenous trees in that 2 hectares, because they know any improvement they make on that piece of land will only increase its value. So when they die, they can leave it to their own children and grandchildren. And even if they should decide to move, they can sell it and recover something from it. Whereas the present arrangement, this communal the ownership of the land, meant you do not own the land on which your hut is built. The headman can tell you to move, and you will have no choice but to move. And you don't know when that could happen. And if you should decide to move, at best you can sell the house you've built, but any of the land around it can be given to somebody else. Who would want to buy the house and find themselves surrounded with land that belongs to somebody else? It doesn't make any sense. You don't have to be an economist, a graduate, to see that that doesn't make any sense. Ian Smith rejected it because he knew that if you give the blacks the land, the economic empowerment will lead to them demanding political power, a meaningful say in the governance of the country. ZANU-PF, after independence, has up to this day, continued to enforce the white colonial policies of communal ownership. For the same reason, the party does not want the people in the rural area to have title deeds and be economically empowered. It is tragic. Here is Margaret Dongo speaking on that very subject.
They have wrong priorities, especially the current government. How can you go and build an airport which services a few people, and the majority are the elite and the so-called investors? Look at the rural. I made you come to interview me because I wanted you to have the experience of the roads that we are using. If we go today to our hospital there, you feel pity with that's a hospital in a rural area. If we go to our clinic, you feel pity. We have no piped water here. Do you know the reason why the rural people vote for ZANU-PF? One, they're intimidated. Two, the policy is that the rural people should remain poor and subservient to the government. They should remain poor, because if they remain poor, they continue singing the song for their master. This is why these people have been impoverished. It's for a reason. Because at the moment, if you economically empower these people, they'll go out of hand. ZANU-PF will never have control over them.
And yet the state president talks of we should not take for granted the freedom we enjoy today. What freedom is he talking about? This is an army general a few months ago reminding the villagers that ZANU-PF is there to rule. They have no say in the governance of the country.
ZANU-PF ichatonga kusvika madhonge ameranya. Muchida musingadi. Ameni. Apa ndakutaura sakomanda ami. Shashandisa inonzi command 40. Yes. Yeah. Yaya masapuku wariti wemusanga chazvigadzira. Yes. Amen. Amen. Vamberi naIdi Mnangagwa, pasi nemhandu wekumasecurity forces. Saka PC mukuru wemauto ndini.
That was the country's commander telling people that he is the commander of the army and ZANU-PF will rule until the donkeys have horns. We will use what we call command vote. Where is the freedom in that? I think one of the most disappointing things about the sorry state of our political system is that here is a man, Mnangagwa, state president, and either he doesn't know or he doesn't care about even the most basic realities. He is the one who is insisting that elections in Zimbabwe have been free, fair, and credible. There are some things we can argue about, but there are others surely we should not be arguing about. How can we be arguing about whether an election is free, fair, and credible when we have failed to produce even something as basic as a verified voters roll? When people are frog marched to attend the ruling party's rallies and then frog marched to go and vote for the party, and we still say there is freedom in the country. It's a sick joke. The truth of the matter is, unfortunately for Zimbabwe, when we thought the end of white colonial rule in 1918 will usher in the new era of freedom for all, justice for all, human rights for all, the respect of everyone's right, including the right to a meaningful vote, and even the right to life itself for all Zimbabweans. That has not happened. ZANU-PF has stepped in and imposed itself as the new oppressor. And we are being reminded every year that we should not take for granted the freedom we enjoy today. I think it's just a way of rubbing it in that what so many people died for has not been realized. 44 years after independence, and we are still fighting for the most basic rights, the right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country, and even the right to life itself. And the people who are denying us that are declared national heroes. Unbelievable. It is sad. It is really tragic that we have come this far only to find ourselves back where we started, if not worse. Still, I want to leave of hope. We can end this anarchy of dictatorship. We have no chance of getting any meaningful reforms implemented before the 2028 elections. That we can forget. ZANU-PF will never reform itself out of power. the few MPs from the opposition side, they are not going to even talk about reforms. They had the opportunity to implement reforms during the GNU. They failed to implement even one. And ever since, they've been participating in flawed elections to give ZANU-PF legitimacy for the sake of getting a few gravy train seats. What is the way forward? The way forward, the way I see it, is that we have got to educate the MDC Triple C supporters who have participated blindly in these flawed elections again and again and again, sometimes on the basis of an idiotic promise like I've plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. As long as Zimbabweans participate in these flawed elections in their millions, I believe SADC, the AU, or anybody else for that matter, will find it difficult to deny ZANU-PF legitimacy. Because they've got to ask themselves, if the process is so flawed, and so many people have said it is flawed, don't participate in it, why are Zimbabweans still participating in it? That is the way forward. Stop participating in flawed elections. And I can rest assure you, SADC, particularly now, last year SADC came out with a damning report that the elections were flawed. And we all know how the level of abuse that Dr. Nevas Mumba of Zambia, who was the head of the SADC election observer mission, got from the ZANU-PF regime. He was called all kinds of names. The language of diplomacy was thrown out of the window. I think SADC leaders know Zimbabweans are not enjoying freedom in Zimbabwe. And they can help, but we must help ourselves. And we are not helping ourselves by participating in a flawed election, knowing fully well that by participating in our millions, we are giving ZANU-PF legitimacy. This is the most important message that we have got to hammer home, particularly in the heads of those 2 million or so Chamisa Chete Chete supporters who voted for Chamisa last year on the back of an idiotic promise that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. It's going to be a tough job because I can rest assure you, these Chamisa Chete Chete have got a personality cult mentality. They don't listen to reason. But somehow we have got to get the message through. What is going on in Zimbabwe is politically, socially, and economically unsustainable. We can't have millions of our people living in abject poverty and be insulted by somebody telling them that they should be enjoying the freedom. They should not take the freedom they are enjoying today for granted. There is no freedom. That is the truth. The heroes that the regime is celebrating, I really do not see how we could have so many heroes in the middle of so much human misery. And yet, none of those so called heroes raised even a finger to stop the madness that has afflicted our country these last 44 years. Thank you very much and have a good day.